Welcome everybody to the December 18th Village of Woodbury Planning Board meeting. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I get a motion to accept the December 4th minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Second? I'll second it.
Oh, okay.
Any questions?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Make a motion to cancel the January 1st Planning Board meeting due to the holiday.
Second?
Any questions?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I received a letter today from Pine Ridge Estates requesting an extension till January 15th. Their extension that we granted them last time expires tonight. So they're asking to be extended to the 15th, where we'll place them on the agenda and they can give us the current status of where they stand with their application.
You can do that.
Okay, great. Make a motion to grant Pine Ridge an extension to January 15th meeting.
I second it.
Any questions?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. First item on the regular agenda tonight, B and B, review and discuss proposed bed and breakfast in an existing single-family home located in the CR zoning district at 191 Route 32 in Central Valley. Said property is known as the Village of Woodbury Tax Map, Section 228, Block 10, Lot 7. Good evening. Yeah, a little button on the bottom of the leaf. On the very bottom. Little green on the jaw.
Hello. Good evening, I'm Jim Dillon, representing the applicant. What we have before you is a single-family residence located at the corner of Route 32 and Gregory Lane. And what they would like to do is convert it to a bed and breakfast. It's located in the CR zone. It's permitted, special permitted use within the zone. What we're asking for is to do a 5-bedroom bed and breakfast. You can see the improvements that we're going to do on it. We're going to do a small gravel driveway here on the side to accommodate the parking. There's an existing driveway which is paved, which we're going to turn into a handicap space. We need to put a slight retaining wall in along the front, and we need to do a handicap access to get up onto the front porch. Our initial application, that was pretty much all we were proposing to do. Basically, everything else exists, all landscaping exists, lighting, obviously, and that's the application.
Any other questions for the applicant before we go?
How many bedrooms are there in that house besides the 5 ones for the guest?
Okay, I happen to have the owner here, so I'm going to let him. What are the total number of bedrooms in the house? 8.
Okay. That's all I have. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And what is it currently being used for that house?
It's just a single-family residence, and 2 and 3 people live there right now. Those would be the same people that operate the bed and breakfast. It's all going to be a family operation. We're going to bring no inside out help, to help, no employees.
All right, anybody else for the applicant or we go to? Okay. Dennis, I know you're back there somewhere.
Yes. As the applicant said, this is a permitted use in the zone. However, in the bulk and area regulations, When they add the B&B use, it's undersized, the lot's undersized right now for a single-family house, but that's an existing nonconformity. When they add this additional use, it will be an additional nonconformity, if you will. It'll be a greater variance. So they'll require a variance for lot area. Also for lot width, right now it's complying 187 feet, and the code requires 125. But when they go to a B&B, it requires 200 feet, so there'll be a requirement for a lot width variance. There's also a requirement for a rear yard. I think you have a memo from Gary Thomasberger confirming that those variances would be required. Under the present configuration, they would require a variance for parking as well, but they may be able to modify that and avoid that variance simply by moving it slightly. They can take a look at their plan and see if they can do that. They should provide some additional information that we requested in terms of the maximum coverage on the site. I think they'll be complying, but they should provide that. As far as the special permit and site plan requirements, in addition to the zoning, we took a look at that. The water and wastewater, we just made some comments on that in terms of confirming with the administrator of the Water and Sewer Department that the connection is satisfactory for the additional use. In firefighting, I don't know whether they require any sprinklers or not. If you do, we'd have to talk to you about the water supply, because I don't think it would be adequate for that, but it may not be required for this use. I'm just not sure. You have to check
Okay,
with-
we'll have to check with the building inspector.
Yes. Will require an erosion sediment control plan, because there is some change in the site. You don't rise to the level of a SWIP, but an erosion sediment control plan would be the SWIP, actually, if you will, because of the clearing for the new parking area. One thing we noted, and John may have some comments on this, is the entrance onto 32 is right at the intersection. It's an awkward spot. It might be better to improve the entrance on Gregory and close up that one to access onto 32. Turning movements that close to an intersection are awkward at best and may be dangerous. So, but John will have something on it, I think. You said you're not going to change any lighting there.
Well, we think we have all lighting. I'm going to take a look at it at night and look at it and show it on the plan so we can see it.
Okay, we don't want to encourage bright lighting there. However,
No.
it should
We may
be
need some
safe.
lighting by the parking lot.
It should be safe lighting so that people can come from the parking area into the structure and not trip and see all hazards.
Yes.
Okay. If there's a sign, the board would want to see it, and typically the signs we've seen for this are simply very small signs. They're regulated by the code. They're small signs, and many times it's just a street address. There's an existing shed in the backyard, but I'm not sure that's the shed you're referring to on the plan, or whether there's a new shed for refuse.
No, that shed exists, and that's what we plan to do with the waste, the garbage cans. We put those inside that.
All right, okay. There is a wetlands on the site. You'd be responsible for securing a permit. That we have a local law on wetlands, and it includes adjacent areas. And so that if you're working anywhere within 100 feet of that wetland, you would require a wetlands permit, at least from the municipality. If that's an Army Corps of Engineers wetland and you're not going into the wetland, there's no buffer requirements for the Army Corps.
It's Army Corps.
Okay. As far as encroachments, there's a fence that's shown on the, I guess that's westerly side. I'm not sure if that's your fence or the neighbor's.
Yeah, there's a story to that. Mr. Shi met the neighbors, and they I guess there's a vegetation line along that line, and he wanted to put up a stockade fence. And they agreed to just put the stockade fence up. This was way before I did a survey. So they put it up, and they just agreed to put a fence up in that location.
When you say they put it up, was it she put it up? Or who?
Did you guys put it up, or the neighbor? We put it up.
Okay.
And
So-
the neighbor agreed that said it was okay.
Okay, your fence is on their property. The
Exactly.
board doesn't approve encroachments, but the board doesn't require you to remove them. That's between you. That's a private matter between you and the neighbor. The requirement of the board typically is that the site will function appropriately if the easement needs to be removed, or not the easement, but if the encroachment needs to be removed. The only problem with that fence is that fence right now is the only thing that's protecting the headlights from those cars from shining on the adjacent property. And it will do an effective job as long as there's a fence there. I made a mention in our report about perhaps turning the traffic and going towards the retaining wall on your own property. Either one would provide a barrier for the lighting, but you need to have something. If the fence was gone, then I would say that's not an appropriate way to do it without a new hedge or a new fence. But you need to have some barrier, and that's my recommendation to the board, is that if that fence remains, that's fine. If it goes down, then there would have to be another barrier to headlights not shining on the adjacent property.
That was my understanding, parking going towards.
Okay, and looking at the handicap ramp that goes from the parking spot into the building, if it's a ramp, and when you start building ramps, there's a requirement for handrails. Don't know if you want to do that or not, and I think the board would want to know that in terms of appearance. Because if you have a ramp that's, you know, a certain percentage, I think it's over 5, then you have double rails on both sides, and it gets into be something that's a structure, if you will.
Preliminarily, I showed that one on the plan, which would be required.
Okay.
That would, that was an issue on it, I told the applicant also,
Okay. That's all I had, unless the board had any questions on the report that we submitted.
Maybe you have any questions for Dennis?
Do I have any questions?
Dennis.
No, no.
Can I just clarify something? You said you didn't require the cameras, you did a 1 on 20?
Yeah, I believe if you do less than 1 on 20, you don't need it.
That's 5%.
5% slope does not require cameras.
Right,
That's what you're doing.
that's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Now you're fine.
Good evening. So, Dennis hit on most of many of our comments. The bed and breakfast is a special permit use. It is defined as owner occupied. The applicant should provide a narrative or evidence that it's satisfactory to the planning board that this home is actually legally contains residences. A floor plan may be appropriate. It is a corner lot fronting on 2 streets. According to the definition of the code, the lines along Route 32 and Gregory Lane are both considered front, and the line facing the back of the house is the rear line. And then the line facing Ponds at the Greens is a side lot line. As discussed, the lot is undersized, and as the building inspector opined, he does see that as a non-conforming building and a commercial use, so therefore the wetlands and floodplains do not need to be subtracted from the lot size. 5 guest rooms are proposed and 7 parking spaces are provided. So that would meet the requirement for the owner and guests, but it wouldn't leave any space available for any employees. I know the applicant just mentioned that the residents would be maintaining the bed and breakfast, but indication of that should be noted on the submission, so that compliance with the number of required parking spaces can be determined. It was also noted that the small portion of the gravel parking lot is within the front yard along Gregory Lane. A reconfiguring of that lot could solve that problem. Otherwise, variance would be required. We addressed the stockade fence. We brought that up in our memo as well. A landscaping plan is not provided, and existing and proposed vegetation and tree removal is not shown. So the standards would require a 25-foot wide buffer in the front yard, as well as plantings around the perimeter of the parking spaces. It may be that existing vegetation and plantings on the lot meet some of these requirements, but that should be shown on the site plan so that we can see that. 100-year floodplain limits are shown on the southwest corner of the site. Topography is not shown south of the patio. The 100-year flood height should be shown on the plan, so the board may determine if there may be any flooding impacts related to the creation of the gravel parking. EAF form question 14 indicates a wetland on the property that is not indicated on the site plan. We also touched on additional lighting or signage. If it is to be provided, it should be shown on the plans. We discussed the driveway. The board may wish to require that the driveway opening from Route 32 be removed and shift access from to Gregory Lane primarily. And finally, this is a type 2 action for the purposes of seeker. There is no new construction proposed, so no need to continue on that. Thank you.
Any questions? Adriana, right?
Yes, Adriana, yes.
Any questions? John?
As has been previously mentioned, our recommendation is that 32 driveway be closed. I would suggest, though, that it remain as a pedestrian path, narrower, so you can access from the parking area to the sidewalk along 32. And also, if there's any drainage that's used currently running down that driveway off the site, it'll still act for that purpose. The driveway to Gregory Lane should be 18 to 20 feet wide, for allowing for two-way traffic operation, and a county permit will be required, since that's a county highway. And we just indicated, since there's going to be people in this site that are not related, which means that you don't, usually when you have a snowstorm, you can get tandem parking because you can remove your car, et cetera. We should show a snow storage area on the site plan, just to show where that would be in the future. And most likely it could be in the front yard where the driveway's being removed. That's a quick summary.
Okay. Are there any amenities planned besides probably the front porch and maybe the backyard as far as seating for guests?
The back patio is going to be for the, we're not going to make any new additions. We made the furniture out there. I don't believe there's going to be any new things added. You're going to be sitting on the front porch and on the slate deck, which is overlooks. Actually, it's a beautiful wetland and
I'm familiar with that, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank
There's
you.
going to be nothing new added to the.
Nothing new. Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
No, I just think the parking needs to be worked out, so there's a whole new plan going to be generated based on the comment.
Yes, I guess I'll have to talk to the applicant, but it looks like we're going to be closing off the access to 32. And obviously, we'll have to widen Gregory Lane and get a county entrance for that.
The buffer between the neighboring lot and the cars pulling up, that could be an issue with the neighbor.
Well, it hasn't been an issue, but according to the code, we're supposed to have parking 10 feet away from the line.
Mhm.
I believe we have a little less here. I'm going to have to move the shift parking away from the back to have the necessary canopy variance for it. And then I'll have to discuss with the applicant with that fence if we don't move that right on the property line.
Okay. Good.
Now, you said that there weren't going to be any employees? Or are there?
All the employees that will be there are family. Just two people that are going to be running the operation, yes.
Are those the two people that are
They're
living there?
Yes.
Okay, so it's just two people. Okay, because we have another bed and breakfast for us, and like them, you were issued a citation for operating B&B. And one of our major requirements is for it to be owner-occupied. Kelly, we're working with the other one to kind of figure out how we're going to prove occupancy. And so that's a big thing, because it has to be owner-occupied. And I noticed on the violation, it wasn't sent to that address, it was sent to a Campbell Hall address. So are you living in Campbell Hall, or are you living in this house?
Myself and my younger sister and my brother live there.
I just need to step to the podium.
So currently myself and my younger brother and sister.
Sorry, what's your name?
Oh, I'm Josh.
Josh, thank you.
Myself and my sister and my brother live at the house, and we came to New York City, so it's a convenient location for us. That's what we work.
Okay, so who is going to be living in the house?
Myself, my brother, and my sister.
Oh, so there are going to be 3 people living in the house? Okay, I thought he just said 2. Okay. So one of you will always be there to breakfast, and that's the only meal that you're serving? It's breakfast?
We actually won't get any food, so no breakfast. Yeah.
Oh, so no breakfast?
Go to bed, minus the
Okay.
You had said there were 8 bedrooms, and I guess narrative, what's on here is 5 plus, I'm gonna guess 1 bedroom for the employees. The county website has it listed as a 5-bedroom home. So, there's a discrepancy there.
No, there are 8 bedrooms total that we were living at that 5 additional rooms.
Okay, well, when you submit the narrative to us, you're going to have to state how many bedrooms are going to be used for bed and breakfast and how many bedrooms are going to be used for owner occupancy. And if the application is approved, that's what would be held to.
Definitely.
So, so we have to somehow figure out how to clear up the discrepancy. Like I said, look on the county tax assessor site, how she lists the 5-bedroom home.
Gotcha.
So I was with the next to middle, we need to see lighting, landscaping, wetland on the site plan, signage detail, the updated driveway width, snow storage locations, and closing off of the exit onto 32, making that a walking path, I guess, if the applicant so chooses. Okay. And then, I guess Kelly said for the ZBA first, right, see the variances? Yeah, so, if you wanna, I guess, write a letter, send them to.
If the board authorizes a referral to the ZBA, we'll send a referral to the ZBA. What we'll list in there, we provide them with our reports and with MPV's reports, and that'll tell them what we see is in terms of variances. But you're going to reconfigure this lot a little bit for parking and that sort of thing. You may be able to eliminate those, but it's your responsibility to go for all the variances you need and request that from the ZBA.
I understand. Are we getting like a positive referral?
The board typically does not do that. The board refers it to the ZBA. ZBA has its authority, its responsibilities. They take care of that. We will provide copies of our reports and the other consultants' reports to the board so they have the benefit of that information, and they'll deal with the variances.
And reading a lot of documents is
Well, if you can comply, you don't need variances, but I think, okay, you need the variances, okay.
It's to keep the project moving and not get too far forward here, because if you don't get your variances in the ZBA, then you have to reconfigure your application, so that would be your next step.
You typically do that by motion if you want me to. Okay. Sorry.
I'll make a motion for referral to the ZBA for the variances that are listed in both Gary's letter and Rick's memo.
Dennis's.
Dennis, Rick, whoever.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
So the memo wasn't from Dennis, from Gary, it was from Dennis?
It was Gary and from Dennis, yes.
There are 3. Gary wrote one, I wrote one, and MPV wrote one.
Really, that's how that basis. You have any other questions for us?
No, we're fine. We're going to get a referral and send to us because of the other board.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yep.
Dunbar Ventures, review and discuss site plan to propose proposed schools with house of worship on vacant properties, and strip of land located between Innocent Road and House 73 Central Valley. Said property is known as the Village of Woodbury Tax Map, section 225, block 1, lot 17A.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Dan Richmond. I work with the law firm Clarence Simon. On behalf of the applicant, with me here this evening is Larry Toro, Civil Tech Engineering, the engineering and planning consultant for the project. It's actually over here, as the owner. We are here tonight, as you know, for a site plan application for proposed two religious schools, one for girls, one for boys on this property. By way of background, as your engineer noted in his memo, we have our clients previously proposed this site for other uses, senior housing, office. The village now here disposed to zone this, so we are looking at residential use, and the residential use that seems most appropriate is for these religious schools. With each religious school would have a study hall or a synagogue that would be used for the students during the week, and we were proposing that in the off hours when the students aren't there, on Sabbath and on Jewish religious holidays, that those also be allowed for synagogue use for the members of the public who want to avail themselves of their use. Mr. Toro can walk you through our site plan, what we propose. We've heard your comments, we've read through the memo. I'm looking forward to talking to the board about some of the comments. Generally, we are looking for some guidance from your board that we are heading in the right direction. We know to take it to the next step, we have to invest, our client needs to invest a bit more money in landscaping, lighting, wetland delineation, and the like. Before it makes that money, wants to invest that money, wants to ensure that the board, again, signals that we're heading in the right direction. You want to speak to the project?
Sir, can you just say your name, because I couldn't hear what you said your name was? Larry
Toro.
T-O-R-R-O.
The application before you was the same as we previously submitted. This package had a little more additional information, some detailing.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you. So, as was stated, there's two separate buildings that'll be on site, and the site overall is made up of two parcels. They will be combined. But for each of the building sites, we have separate parking and an ingress and egress around the facilities. The overall footprint of the building is 16,400 square foot. There's 3 floors for 49,000 square foot. Fairly straightforward, municipal sewer and water, and like I stated before, the plan itself is the same. It's just been some additional details regarding the grading, drainage, etc.
Can I just ask, so there is no basement?
They will have basements.
There will be basements, okay, so at the same footprint?
Correct.
And that's included in the total square footage you have now?
No, that's above ground. We'll have to modify that.
Well, as I always do, start with the zoning. In terms of the use, there are 2 schools proposed, and they both have a place of worship. And the place of worship is going to be operated at times off hours of the schools. So the question I have is whether it's 2 uses or 4 uses. And I really can't answer that. I don't know. And I think that's something that's going to have to be referred to Gary, because that'll depend on the bulk and area regulations are determined by the number of uses and the types of uses on the site.
That is one point, Mr. Jones, I saw in your memo that I guess we would need clarification from. It seemed to me that if I understood the reading of your memo, it would be that if it were a school and a religious use, you're suggesting that you would add the bulk requirements. So for example, if a school is requires 2 acres and a house of worship 1 acre, you would require 3 acres. Respectfully, I guess I would disagree with that interpretation of the code. That seems that what you do is you meet the more conservative requirement of the code, which is what our intent was.
The
to
code
comply
is,
with the
the
school?
code in that particular case in Woodbury is clear. It says when there's multiple uses on a site, it's the sum of the uses in lot area, not in others.
I don't think it says the sum of the lot area. I think it says that the lot shall be large enough to satisfy the minimum lot area density requirements of each use. So for example, if it's a 2-acre lot, it meets the school use and it also meets the house of worship use.
By that definition, you could have 6 uses on a lot, and the largest one, say, is 1 acre, so then you put 6 uses on for 1 acre. That's not the way it's been interpreted since I've been here. So we can refer that to the building inspector for his interpretation, but I just tell you that that's the way it's been interpreted thus far.
Thank you.
It took me 5 minutes to get
Sorry.
the microphone.
As far as the Vulcan area, and this is an area where, to your point, we haven't added things in terms of Vulcan area. It's the more restrictive use that has applied. So if there's 2 uses on the site, in terms of coverage, there's 20% allowed for the school, but there's 10% allowed for a religious place of worship. In your particular case, you're asking for 30%, so it would be a waiver, or not a waiver, or a variance, either way. But it would be 10% if it's a house of worship, so just, I note that. There are other variances for front yard. Front yard in the R3A zone requires 100 feet. The plan shows a 40-foot setback. In the rear yard, 100-foot depth is required for schools. The plan shows 29.7 feet. There's also a secondary requirement for frontage on a state highway to have a 50-foot yard, unoccupied and open to the sky. That, I think, would require an interpretation from Gary, because the state highway that you front on is the state highway in the rear of the property. There's no possibility of access. It's a limited access highway. So I'm not sure if Gary's interpreted that previously. I thought maybe we had something like that for Legacy Ridge on the thruway, which might have established a precedent. I have to look back on that, but I think we'd refer that to Gary as well. We won't go over lot area again. We talked about that. That's in the report. And there's a question on that. As far as parking, the quantity of parking spaces required depends on the floor area, the seats, and the number of students. We don't have all the information. We would need to have that information to make a determination. Typically what happens is the applicant will list that on a plan and a parking analysis. But if this is going to be referred to the ZBA, if that's the path of this, we would want to pass it along for any parking variances that would be required as well.
Before we get to, as you noted in your memo, the planning board does have the authority to waive these requirements. I understand that the ZBA could also grant variances.
They can waive some things, and I'll defer to Kelly on this, but they can waive some things. Other things they can't waive, depending upon where it is in the code. So.
Right, he's right. I think your first step before we get into whether you need waivers or variances is to get the interpretations from Gary. There were a few things that were discussed the last time that this was before the board. This was actually one of them, and getting the interpretation. And when Dennis is done, I'm going to just jump in.
Okay. We repeated some other zoning issues. I'm not going to go into them, but there's landscape screening and buffering that we don't know that's on there yet. Loading berths are required. There are certain requirements for those. There's hedge screenings that are required. These are all things that are in the zoning section, so would be matters that are either complied with or require variances, or waivers if the authority rests with the board. In terms of site plan, I'm not going to go through that in detail. We do have a more detailed plan now, but it's not a full site plan. I think Larry would be the first one to say it's not a full site plan yet. But on sewer, there are some things in here that may require some more due diligence from the applicant. It talks about that they're going to be pumped to the existing sewer pump station constructed for Woodbury Junction. There's a number of things that are shown on the Woodbury Junction plan that were not constructed, that were modified during construction. There was a pump station that was right by Ninninger. That's not being built. They've changed that, and there's a pipeline that runs by gravity now, so that there's opportunity for a gravity connection, but that would be over at the intersection of Dunderberg and Inninger. There's no sewer, as far as I know, in the area by this site, other than at that intersection, which is the far easterly end of your site. There are a number of other details that we've shown, or talked about. I don't think we need to go into those right now. For water, I don't know of any water on Ninninger. Again, there's nothing in that area. So you'd have to take a look at the water and see where you would make a connection. Stormwater management, we will need a SWIP for this site. And it will depend upon how much coverage. I mean, the applicant is requesting 30%. The maximum permitted in your code would be 20% for the school and 10% if it's determined to be a house of worship. So those are significant differences in terms of impervious coverage and how it would affect their stormwater plan. So they would want to do that before they produce their SWIP. We had some comments on the erosion sediment control plan. I'm not going to go through those. I'm starting to see blank faces and excruciating detail on the engineering here.
Smooth.
This is one safety aspect, and that is on the retaining wall. There is a retaining wall here. It has elevation differences of up to 16 feet. Right now, it's just shown as a 6-inch curb. Obviously, I don't think they would intend to do that. There's more detail that they'll need, but they'll need to show whether there's going to be a fence, guide rail, protection for children, protection for anyone from going over that wall. It's a very narrow site, so they're limited on what they can do, and to level a site out to make it usable, they have to put a significant wall over by the highway. In terms of access, we'd want to review site distances, grades, and other general information that's not available yet. I'm sure John will want to have that. Lighting and landscape plan is required. And let me just see, I'm going to skip to, they have our memo. It's some 6 pages in length, so I'm not going over all of it. There's a recreation space, an area designated for recreation space. I took a look at that. The grades there are 20% in one area, 8% in another area, and there's a small area in the middle that looks like it's about 4%. I don't know if they're proposing any walls in that area to make it more usable, but at the steep grades, those areas are not going to be very usable for recreation areas. We have given some comments on the seeker materials that were provided. Some are typos, some are some additions that we recommend. I think the applicant should consider that and modify their seeker document as necessary. In terms of ridge preservation, technically this area does have one area, believe it or not, that rises above elevation 600 in the corner. It's not an area proposed for development, and quite frankly, this area, calling it ridge preservation, would be surprising to me. So I note it for the board's information, but I don't think really need much on that. The lot is heavily wooded. The board should consider preservation of trees where possible, but quite frankly, that's limited here. There are some areas on the extreme west that won't be touched. They can maintain that. Maybe they can note some other areas, but with all the development that we'd be taking on here, plus the retaining walls, it's doubtful it would be much saved in the way of trees. That's all I had, unless you had any questions. I know I glossed over some items, but the fundamental things are all the variances that would be necessary for this level of density.
With the stone wall up against the quick way, does the state get involved in that? Because we read up on their property?
Well, the state will be, I think if they'd be, well, I don't know if they're involved agency. They'd be interested. I don't know if they have a permitting authority here or not. The county would. The county has a permitting authority. But nevertheless, they would be interested. They would be provided with the documents. I think you would want to have it as an attractive wall, you know.
The only condition that would, you may need a state permit, is if you needed to encroach on the state right-of-way in order to construct the wall, then you may need to have a DOT permit. So I would list them as a potentially involved agency, because it would have.
That's a ministerial permit, though, I believe.
Yeah, but they still are a permitting authority.
You may or may not. You're about 5 feet away. It's shown right now from the wall
But I
side. Whether you
think-
can build it there or not, I don't know.
That type of DOT permit, I think, is a type 2 action.
Well, what I was gonna say, I know I left the board on the edge of their seats, which is why I'm so anxious. I just wanted to jump in because at the last time this was before the board, one of the things that was requested was a full EAF. This is a type 1 action, which is requiring a full EAF, and what you received was a short EAF. So you are able to declare your intent to be lead agency and type it as a type 1, but we couldn't mail anything out until we got that full EAF. And just so the board knows, when I prepare for these meetings, I also include lists of who I think are involved agencies. I did list the DOT, so they would be getting notice of this anyway.
Would it be premature to declare yourself the agency if so many variances are needed?
Not that it would necessarily be premature, because you could do that knowing, but what my concern is that there's a lot of open-ended issues with the interpretations from Gary that may actually change the plan potentially, and how they approach it. But once they get those and they can get back on the agenda, I think that you would be able to declare your intent to be the agent.
Sorry, jumped over you. Go ahead.
Okay. Again, reviewing the memo prepared by Jonathan, the proposed gross floor area and floor plans, including all levels of each building, should be provided. We brought up the same issue that basements, if they are included, which we've heard that they are, would put this over the threshold as a type 1. And so all of the information regarding the floor plans and gross floor area needs to be provided. Additionally, at previous meetings, elevations were discussed. No new elevation sheets have been provided, and that will also be important for the board's consideration. No buzzer loading and unloading areas are shown on the site plan, and no dumpster sites are indicated either. Loading berths for the school buildings are required and are not shown, and lighting and landscaping has been noted that has not been included and will need to be included. Several variances will be required, that has been noted as well. Additionally, we noted several variances that were not listed on the site plan or in the narrative, and so a comprehensive list of the variances required should be provided in the next application. Again, Jonathan brings up the discussion of the use and how many uses are actually occurring on site. Clearly, the building inspector should opine on that. He also notes that the parking spaces currently are only providing 121 spaces per the code requirement of 1 parking space per every 300 square feet of floor area for a school building. That would require 328 parking spaces. The planning board can waive up to 25% of parking, but clearly that would not be enough to support the requested 121 spaces. So a discussion would need to be supported. At both schools, parking spaces are shown backing out directly into bus travelways. Adequate on-site loading and unloading areas for buses are not shown. The plan would need to show a logical and safe circulation for buses and cars with a little more detail. He has a comment regarding outdoor recreation areas not being shown. Clearly, if they are shown, they may not be adequate. Landscaping or noise attenuating features should be shown that would buffer the school building from the quickway traffic, particularly for noise. And narratives indicate that worshipers using the on-site place of worship would walk to the site, and they would not drive or utilize parking. However, no sidewalks are indicated along the street frontage of the site or within the site. All users would be coming from across the street, as no housing is located on the south side of Nininger or Dunderberg Road. No crosswalks are shown across the road, and so safe pedestrian access to and within the site should be shown and provided for users if walking is going to be the primary access. Again, the proposed action appears to be a type 1 under seeker, and clearly more of the site plan and the uses needs to be fleshed out prior to declaring or noticing the intent to become lead agency, and that's the extent of our comments on that.
Many of the comments have been issued. We're recommending that a full traffic impact study be prepared. Memo indicates the hours that we would suggest to be done. In addition, we're going to need a narrative that describes the operation of both schools, both for the school children as well as for the...
John, did you prepare a memo?
Yes, I did.
Okay, we didn't get a copy.
Okay,
of it.
I'll be glad to give you a copy of
Okay,
it.
that'd be good.
Okay. Of critical importance here is the, right now you're calling for 4 driveways to a county road. I think the first thing we're going to have to do is I would suggest the county and the village meet with the county applicant, the county and the village meet to discuss where the primary location of those driveways should be. Ideally, the county is trying to restrict the number of curb cuts along a county roadway. I can't see them allowing 4, and in fact, the 4 that we have, it's really opposite the direction of school bus traffic that you would want on site, because the way the circulation is shown, the children will be discharged from the bus on the opposite side of the building, not adjacent to the building, which means they'd be getting out of the bus, having to walk in front of the bus to get to the building. Ideally, the circulation should be the other way. We're worried about the headlight glare, especially if the circulation pattern is left the way it is, because the state is very concerned about 2 properties adjoining one another with the headlights in one direction, for example, on the ramp, and then headlights from the site going the other direction. So there are a number of issues, the most critical being the location of the driveways and whether or not there should be 1 driveway, 2 driveways, or in fact, the county may want to allow 4. I don't think 4 is the number. I think it's somewhere less than 4.
John, if we wanted to have a meeting with the village and the county as you suggest, would we work that through you?
Yes, if it's okay with the board. Is that okay, Mr. Chairman? I'm fine with that, as long as we can. Okay. And there are a number of other issues with respect to the sidewalk has been pointed out, with respect to the drainage, and with respect to the anticipated population that would be there, because is the school also going to be used for a house of worship during the evening hours? Is after the school closes, et cetera? And then which of those 2 buildings is going to be the critical one? Is it going to be both equally shared as a house of worship? Both, I mean, both are going to still have they're going to have the facilities involved, but it appears that the one to the west is the preferable building, based upon walking. If I'm walking down the hill, I don't want to walk back up if I don't have to. So there are a number of issues, but I think the first thing is let's get the driveway locations that are going to be set. We can rearrange that.
Thanks.
That's a quick summary. I think the memo stands for itself, but I think we have to start there.
I have a question. I don't know whether it was correct in the newspaper. I read that there was a problem with Woodbury Junction storm water drainage through the property. Is that correct?
The drainage for that project, apparently we just recently learned, was proposed or was approved to drain a site that, you can see the site plan is narrow, somewhat constraining, we're sensitive to, the area we have, and our client needs to protect its rights there. Again, it was surprised to learn that another project was proposing to have its stormwater, management served by draining onto our property.
Now, is that underground or out in the open, the drainage of the stormwater?
Well, I think it would be under a tunnel that would go under Ginger Road, or Jennifer Road. A culvert that would go under the road and then drain, divert, artificially channel stormwater from their property onto this property.
Is that in litigation?
Yes.
Thank you.
No comments.
I have a few. Kelly, when we got the GML 239 from the last time, I know we had to refer it again because of the size of the building wasn't accurate. Now that we know that there's basements that weren't in the size on the 239 that was sent for this,
Well, I think that once we get the full EAF, because the county is going to want that, it would be sent again.
it would be sent
Yeah.
again? Okay, all right. Because, I mean, something that sticks out from their original one, which I don't think much has changed, under site compatibility, the county says, mentions all about students walking, the hazards, the traffic, and then they say, as such, the site may be better suited for a use that would continue to act as a visual and noise buffer along County Route 64, which is Nenninger, I believe, such as passive recreation area or open space. So it doesn't sound like this fits into the county's plans at all.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would like their client to reserve its property as open space for which, but, it is private property, our client has a right to develop it.
Oh, I understand that, but what I'm saying, where I'm going with this is if the county at this early stage has, issued their objections at this point, what are the odds that they're going to be, in favor of putting in curb cuts and, allowing this type of traffic? And
That's a good point. I mean, you're
Ingress and
here to
egress.
find out if you're on the right path, and you have a letter from the county saying, not so much.
Look, it's, again, I don't question it's a difficult property, and we'll have to work with the county, and again, it is a religious use that's, has certain protections under land use law.
Oh, I understand that, but there's certain protections for the people that are going to be using it. I mean, there's absolutely no sidewalks, I don't know how, I'm sorry, I don't know where you live or where you're from or how often you travel that area. But it's a high-traffic area, especially with the schools, our schools, the schools that are existing there right now, at different times of day. So I'm really concerned when I think of small children, especially since this is, according to the narrative, all the children are supposed to be under 15 years of age.
The students would be bused. I mean, I'm not sure you're suggesting that students.
Well, if there's houses of worship there, they're not going to be using the houses of worship on high holy days or on the Sabbath?
You would be right, we would have to determine that, if there's a crosswalk that can be developed in the area.
Right, so they will be traveling.
Well, yeah, I think you're going to have that information in a narrative, so you know exactly how this whole project is operating.
Well, that was my
But-
next question on this narrative. Oh, hold on, because I have to read it off of here.
So I just pulled up the June 2019 GML report that was received. They didn't say any mandatory comments or anything like that yet because they haven't received a full statement, and likely because they're waiting for the full EAF, so they haven't actually issued their final comments yet, just
No,
so
I
that
know
you
they're not the final comments, but
Okay.
that's what,
But that's what's been raised so
Right.
far.
right. Okay, in the Civil Tech memo or narrative, there's talk about the female teachers will either come via bus or taxi. How many female teachers do you expect to have? If you don't know that, I would like that to be part of this next narrative, because I want to know how many taxis, in addition to the buses, will be entering and exiting in the morning and then again in the afternoon. There was also a part about another use for, in addition, classroom space will be utilized for ritual classes I don't know what those are, but for adults, these classes are only in the evenings or on, and it's, pardon my, if I'm saying this incorrectly, Shabbat? Adult classes held up for up to 5 students at a time. These students generally carpool. For the children, these classes will be part of their day. These classes for the adults, when do they run? Are they daily?
We're gonna have to talk to the intended user of this to clarify their intended use of this.
Okay, yeah, and everything that's brought up in the narrative, if there could just be more detail to it, because there's a lot on here that, I mean, like I said, I'm questioning as far as the traffic. That's my biggest thing, is the traffic. I'm done.
One more.
So, I mean, we got some preliminary feedback from consultants from the board. We still got a ways to go. I think really the next big step here will be a referral to Gary for the interpretation of which came first, or which use is going to be primary, which use is going to be secondary, so we can keep moving forward. Correct, Kelly? Okay, and, so I'll make a motion for to have Dennis send a referral to Gary for interpretation of use, the lot use.
I'll second.
Well, I'll speak to Gary about that. I'll advise him of this. The referrals to the ZBA are more formal. It goes as a letter to the board. This, I have your discussions with the applicant here. I'll speak to Gary about it and tell him the outstanding items. He can look at our memo and determine, based upon what they've said here. Well, I don't know it's another submission. I think we'll ask Gary for the interpretations, the ones that I've outlined in here, the questions of for uses, that sort of thing. And obviously, if he renders an opinion and you have a separate opinion, Gary would welcome any comments that you might have. Okay.
I did have one other question that I forgot. Will there also be mikvahs in both buildings? We don't know?
I don't know.
Okay.
And Dennis, can you, I know it's early, but can we send it to ESL just to start getting their
Sure.
feedback too, please? In the process.
Will do.
Thank you, sir.
One item is, I heard before about crosswalks. I mean, you can put a crosswalk in, but there needs to be a walking path on both sides. Ninja Road is a tough road, so if you're gonna show a crosswalk, it should show a safe route, safe access for people where they may come, where they may go, where the pedestrian movements are. The road's a little tough to be walking along. Okay.
And I'm sorry, I did have one other thing. I noticed on the maps, you have Dunderberg Road, that's actually Ninninger.
Any other questions for us?
Well, I guess, it's helpful to get a general sense from you where we are. I don't know if you can give us any more feedback or.
I think you've gotten the feedback.
Yeah, there's plenty of feedback there.
Can't really give a general head nod at this point. I mean, you're missing a lot of information. But you've had a lot of questions that now they know the answers and things like that you're looking for, what the consultants are looking for. We'll hear from Gary, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Nothing to the ZBA. No, it's just to Gary, right?
You can just pull that.
Yeah.
I will need a motion now to go into attorney-client to receive legal advice from the next applicant.
I'll make that motion.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do this for a few minutes.
I didn't go to the next town board meeting or village board before that. Yeah.
Sorry.
Did you get parking that night at the restaurant? Yeah, they opened up the parking lot?
All right, we good?
Everybody back?
Okay. Next item on the agenda for tonight, Highland Mills Center Group Senior Housing, discuss site plan and special use permit submitted for proposed 96-unit senior housing project located on the east side of Route of Route 32 near the intersection of Ford Avenue and Highland Mills. Said property is known as the Village of Woodbury Tax Map, Sections 218, Block 2, Lot 7, 9, 10, 11, and 13. Little circle on the bottom. Like, right.
It's tough. Okay, I've got the green light. George Lithgow from Jacobitz and Gubitz were the project attorneys. Barry Tarek is the project architect. And Caleb Pavelski with the W is the representing the project engineer, Peter, Zach, and Fow. If this looks familiar, we have been here. This is like to keep in the spirit, this is the project past. We have a project present to discuss with you tonight, and then we'll have a project future, which will be coming back for site plan approval if the village board decides to rezone the property. So we have received comments from your planner, from your engineer, from your traffic consultant. We've been through those. We know there's things to be corrected. We will do that. I don't think we need to go over it, but Caleb is going to explain to you what the actual proposed plan of development is, what would be rezoned in terms of area. We have looked at that carefully to make sure we have identified it correctly, and we will be revising the full EAF for you and your consultants to review. We're hopeful that we're here tonight for two things. One is this has been referred to you as a local law from the village board, and they're looking for your report and referral back. And then seeker. You did a seeker determination in May of 2018, a negative declaration. We are hopeful that even though the project has been expanded somewhat to provide additional units, that you can still make a determination that the impact of the expanded project is not significant. And just, I think the history is related in the H2M memo on the first page, but we went through this process with you in 2018. We went to the village board for a hearing in, I believe it was July, and the hearing didn't produce a lot of comment from the public, but there were two concerns that the village trustees identified. One was the question of sewer, which we have spent a considerable amount of time addressing. The other was a concern about whether there was need for a traffic signal at the intersection as we had originally discussed. After looking at the traffic carefully, we developed we relocated the access northward. That eliminates the need for the single, and it still provides for safe turning north and south. So there has been discussion, I know, with your traffic consultant and our traffic consultant today to try to refine that driveway location, address the parking that's intended to be parking for the mortgage place, which has an existing parking need, and this was an attempt to make that. So we're going to work and see if we can address those issues. But I think that's something that we'll resolve during site plan to your satisfaction. So because some of you have not, well, at least one member, I believe, was not here in May of 2018, I thought it would be helpful to have Barry just do a quick presentation, show you the elevation and layout. This is what was developed in 2018. He'll explain how it's going to be modified to address the additional units. And then Caleb can show you the site and the area that's being proposed for rezoning, and discuss how it's going to be rezoned.
Sir, can you just state your name and spell it for us?
Yeah, Barry Tarek.
I think your microphone is not bearing the beat.
address location. What's the address?
Say what I wanted to say, or say what you wanted to.
Timber Ridge, 32.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Just briefly, we've got here plans that were actually developed several years ago at the inception of the project. It's a for apartment building. There are going to be two buildings which will be essentially identical on the site. The building is comprised of a combination of 1 and 2 bedroom units, varying sizes anywhere between about, if I remember right, about 680 square feet to just about 1,100 square feet, depending upon unit location and amenity. Buildings are set up with a central entry. The floor plan represented here is a second and third floor, just as a typical layout. But the main entry will come in on a central axis, be an elevator and a stair there. There are egress stairs on either ends of the connecting hallway. Each floor has 14 units. Again, combination of 1s and 2s on each floor. 3 stories building, pitched roof, clapboard siding, stone or brick accent. And the buildings are set up with common area potential. This is a schematic plan, but there's space reserved in these locations, and there's a lounge library space here, as is part of the requirements for the building type for the senior housing. There's opportunities for these amenities on every floor. So you're looking at these just so you can see. These units here are 1 bedrooms, and these units here are 2 bedrooms.
Is there a basement or is it?
Waiting to see the final grading. These buildings have been moving around on the site. You know, we're developing the site, but it is anticipated there will be basements. The use of the basement will be, it's not for any occupancy. It'll be mechanical use. I'm sure if we can gain access, there'll be used for storing of maintenance equipment, let's say snow blowers, lawn mowers, any of that type of thing. But that's as far as the basements go. There's no planned development in the basement.
Does each unit have their own washing machine, or is it centrally located?
No, each unit will have its own washing machine, dryer. Each unit will have its own heat plant, individually operated. There's not going to be a central plant in the building.
Full kitchen,
Yeah. Oh, these are, you know, nice apartment units. Yeah, full kitchens, eat-in kitchen areas, bathrooms. The 2 bedroom units have bathrooms, 1 master suite, and then another hall bathroom. It also goes without saying that every unit is ADA accessible, fully B-type units.
What type of heat is it? Is it electric heat, or is it forced air?
I can't tell you it's
gas?
developed yet.
Yeah.
So,
You said each unit will have its own individual heat?
yeah.
But these are rental units, right?
Yes.
They're all rental units,
Yep.
not
Yep, but
purchased.
everybody has their own thermostatic control.
Okay.
Questions from consultants or no?
And each unit has a deck, what you're looking at here. Each unit has a deck that comes off public space.
Would there be any like party rooms or fitness rooms or anything in it?
Yeah, and that's part of what's undeveloped in some of these spots. You know, it's at this point just casually called a lounge library just to denote a public use, but this could very well, you know, these occur on every floor. So in the central location, it's a lobby downstairs with mailboxes, but the 2 floors above, it's a common space, and then we just haven't assigned what we're going to do with some of those corner spaces. So yes, it's what the amenities are is still to be decided, but the space has been reserved for them.
What's the height of the building?
And I can tell you I'm positive. Let's see. I just don't remember the number. Right now it's set for 35 feet. Obviously, that's going to be refined. This is devoid of a grading plan. So,
Will there be central air?
Yes.
And again, is that going to be?
Well, that'll be individually operated.
Okay, and so the central air units will be located where?
The roof the reason that the measurement is to the top part of the roof is because there is a flat section of the roof.
Okay.
It's pitched mansard style, it's pitched, and then we'll have a flat, so the units will be there and out of sight. You won't be able to see the units on the roof.
So they'll be contained within 35 feet?
Correct. We've done sometimes, again, still developing it. There could be a recess in the roof that allows those units as long as you're drained out. But we're sensitive to the visual aspect of that, so we'll make sure that those are not seen from the ground.
Now, all these units are independent living, none of them are assistant living units?
Correct.
Okay.
So there's no staff or anything?
No.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Good evening. So as previously mentioned, we're coming here for a zoning change as part of the site plan approval. This property is actually broken up into about 6 different unit or tax lots. What we're proposing is to do a zoning change of a combination of these lots, totaling 16.12 acres. It would become senior housing. The way that it would be broken up would be, again, this would be the senior housing. This is where the majority of everything would be. From there are 2 sections of property that will be added on into this adjoining property. It's a mobile home trailer park, I believe. Those would be rezoned into that R1A zoning when attached onto that property. When we create this lot, we'll also create 2 separate lots, a 2 and a 3 on either side. But those will not be used as part of this project. So, showing here the site plan. As previously mentioned, this is conceptual in nature. It's by no means the final design. Final drawings containing information for erosion control, grading, utilities will be provided in the site plan review. You can see here we have access from the top. Coming down, the buildings will be laid out in such a manner. We have providing 212 parking spaces in total. Requirement is 209. 3 of those, as George mentioned, are up here above the building setback. They're providing for the local or the adjoining mortgage company. If that's a problem, they can be removed, not a problem. But,
So that little strip, I'm sorry, these maps are so tiny.
sorry.
That little strip of white, that's where the mortgage company is now?
Yes, that's right there. That's their property.
In the narrative, there was mention about the employee parking. What type of employees are we talking about? Maintenance people?
I believe so, yes. You can consult the narrative. Yeah.
Spring Lane shown on the map somewhere?
Spring Lane show. That's a good question. Yeah, it's right along here, Spring Lake.
You just see the entrance.
So, if you don't mind me asking, why did you change, why was everything changed from the last time?
There have been discussions between the project sponsor and the village. One of the things that the project sponsor is doing is making a substantial contribution to the Timber Ridge HOA to facilitate their repair of the infiltration into the sewers, which is causing a large part of the problem at the Howledge pump station. So this is a way that the project can sort of continue forward even though it's making a substantial investment in that repair.
To get bigger.
To get a little bigger, yes.
Okay.
And it is, again, this is something which is going to be developed in phases, and one of the assumptions is, and I think it's been proven out by market analysis, that there is a need for this kind of housing in the town and village.
Well, I don't know, when was the last time that a study was even done for that? I believe one was done years and years ago, but.
One was done by the village back, or the town actually, I think at that point, in 2010. It's in the comprehensive plan.
Well,
But
town?
we've also had someone do a study and
I wouldn't think it would be the town, because the town wasn't in charge of building and zoning in 2010.
it was done before, it's in the 2011 comprehensive plan that the village did, but I believe it was done by the town at the point it was done. But there seems to be, there is some concern about that. If you recall from the original proposal, when we went to the village, the question was, well, what happens if that's not the case? And what was concluded is we can develop this in phases. So there is one building which can be developed, and then the second building can be developed if and when the first building rents up to 80%. So if there is any concern about it, it's addressed by the fact that we're not going to do two buildings if we can't rent the first.
But it seems like the district, the overlay district has gotten larger, but you're compacting where the buildings are gonna be.
Which is what both the,
What are the plans for the
there's
rest
no,
of the overlay district?
it's going to be used as support land for the senior project. We can't use it for something else. It's being,
I understand that, but when you say support land, what,
well, it's meeting the area requirement. So we have to provide 16 acres of land in order to develop this project. We can't use it for some other purpose. So it's going to be left the way you see it. Effectively, it's being conserved as open space. So it's, providing substantial buffers from the land to the north and to, the trail